Arrow, you have failed this network. Okay, not really, because the show is currently in the midst of its 7th season and all, but it has now been announced that the CW have decided to end the series, with Arrow coming to a close after an abbreviated final season. Launched back in 2012, it's worth remembering that Arrow really helped change the game for superheroes on television. This was 3 years before Netflix would debut Daredevil, and even a year before Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. The most well-known superhero series back then was Smallville, but Arrow arrived to put a much darker, Nolan-inspired, action-packed spin on the genre, although whether or not Oliver Queen was the right character for that approach is still up for debate. Running at a time when the Dark Knight trilogy had just wrapped up and comic books on the big screen were dominated by the much lighter MCU, it was a much-needed alternative for its first 2 seasons, which remain a high point for the Arrowverse and the genre as a whole. Sure, it's massively wavered in quality since those first couple of years, but it has spawned an entire shared universe that managed to bounce back from its lowest points at various different occasions over the years. Still, it's hard to argue that it should continue beyond Season 8, and there are a number of reasons why the CW have decided to wrap it up now. So, let's unpack them, shall we? I'm Ewan from What Culture, and here's why Arrow just got cancelled. Number 6, the ratings have been in decline for years. The Arrowverse is a strong brand as a whole thing, but it's perhaps greater than the sum of its parts. They all perform well enough for the CW, but none have maintained particularly huge ratings, while Arrow is a victim of how long it's been running. The series averaged over 3 million viewers for its first 3 seasons, but has seen a considerable drop-off since then. It slipped below 2 million in Season 6, and this year is averaging just 1.2 million. That's still enough to make it the CW's 4th biggest show overall, behind The Flash, Supernatural, and Supergirl, and it's 3rd in terms of the all-important 18 to 49 demographic on average this year, but it's just had a massive drop there as well. The show has been off for just under a month now, but its return this week opened with just 0.2 mil in the 18 to 49 demo, a drop-off of almost 50% from the previous installment. It's still better than some of the other Arrowverse shows, and generally a solid performer for the CW as a whole, but it's also far older, which means less incentive to keep on making it when the ratings are likely to keep going down and the network is looking to its long-term future. It's had well over 100 episodes, opening it up for bigger syndication deals, and this gives it a chance to go out before they're simply flogging a dead horse. Number 5, the show peaked in Season 2. When looking at the show's decline in ratings and why the CW feel they don't need it anymore, there's one fairly simple reason. It peaked back in Season 2. This was the year of Oliver vs. Slade and Arrow vs. Deathstroke, and it produced the show's most consistent and electrifying storytelling. It was epic in the threat to Starling City, but also extremely personal between hero and villain. The action went to a new level, the characters were much better developed, the performances stronger, and the writing sharper. It's one of the high points of the Arrowverse as a whole, matched by Season 1 of The Flash, and even led to a boost in ratings. Season 3 performed better on the back of how good Season 2 was, but then Season 3 was a massive letdown. I mean, seriously, why was Ra's al Ghul there again? And you can see the drop-off in Season 4 too. The 4th season was arguably even worse quality-wise, and you can see the dip in ratings become much starker. The show arrested the halt with a back-to-basics 5th season that improved the quality by a great margin, but once that kind of rot is set in, and a show has gained a reputation for no longer being as good as it used to be, it's difficult to reverse that kind of consensus. Number 4, it had a 5-season plan. Throughout a lot of Arrow's run, we heard about the show having a 5-season plan. Season 5 was always the aim, the point to which the cast and crew wanted to reach. That made a lot of sense, given the nature of the show's flashbacks. Oliver Queen went missing for 5 years, and the flashbacks were filling in the gaps of what happened each year, which lined up with each season of the show. Ergo, 5 years, 5 seasons, and then all the story would be complete. Season 5 actually had a bit of this approach to it. For the first time in years, the flashbacks really felt connected to the present-day storyline, offering up some nice parallels as everything started to come full circle. The Season 5 finale went back to Lian Yu and then blew it up entirely. If Arrow had wanted to go out after Season 5, then it could hardly have chosen a more fitting way to do so. Oliver Queen saving his son, and the island being destroyed could have made for a very fitting endpoint, to the extent you could almost imagine they'd planned it as such. Except, of course, they hadn't. The show returned for season 6, which dipped slightly in quality and is now halfway through its 7th season, which again hasn't managed to top season 5. It's not bad by any means, but Arrow has already stayed on the air longer than anyone ever imagined it would. It'd be unwise to outstay that welcome much further. Number 3, the CW have other DC shows to replace it. Arrow founded the Arrowverse, but it's grown to be much bigger than that one show. The Flash has long since overtaken it as the most popular of the bunch in terms of ratings and killer sharks, while Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow have both cultivated their own fan bases and parts of the universe too. Arrow largely stands apart in terms of tone, and it's not like the CW don't have other shows to replace it with. Batwoman recently made her debut in the Arrowverse crossover with a pilot episode in the works. If that gets ordered to series, then it would be a natural replacement for Arrow. The latter is itself heavily inspired by Batman, so by having Batwoman and Gotham in play, it can easily fill the gap Arrow would be leaving behind. But they also have the advantage of writing it so that it fits with the Arrowverse too. Black Lightning, similarly, could be brought into the Arrowverse, and even if it's not another relatively new DC superhero show on the network. Speaking at the TCA tour back in January, the CW's president, Mark Pedowitz, said things will age and we want to get the next generation of shows to keep the CW DC universe going for as long as possible. Arrow, going into its 8th season, is the old guard of the universe, and it's going to help pave the way for more DC shows over the next few years. And looking beyond just the CW, there's also DC Universe, which is launching a number of streaming series which are just going to further diversify their output and create greater competition. Number 2, Arrow has been winding down Oliver's story anyway. In a lot of ways, Arrow has already been setting the stage for its own exit. Season 7, which started with Oliver Queen in prison, has seen him largely done with vigilantism. There's a new Green Arrow in town, and the guys with his half-sister, Emiko Queen, and we've seen flash forwards to a future without Oliver as well. Of course, Arrow has toyed with the idea of Oliver passing on the mantle or hanging up the hood before now, but has never really been able to fully commit to it. This time though, there's a real chance for a proper ending to his story. After lots of will they, won't they, Oliver and Felicity are now happily married with a baby on the way. Other people will fight for Star City. He has a reason to give up being the Green Arrow. He's worked with the SCPD, and a lot of the season has seen a debate about the place of vigilantism in society. To that end, you can see the logic that Arrow would have been ending one way or another soon enough. It might have gone on for another year or two in the producer's ideal world, or at least a full season rather than an abridged one, but luckily it's not going to be too abrupt a conclusion because some of the groundwork has already been laid. It's here where there will be a debate about the semantics of cancelled versus ending, but the news comes just after the CW's president has spoken about planning for the new generation, and a few months after Romell professed his love for the show and that he'd be back for season 8 if it gets renewed. It did indeed get renewed just last month, but even then there were rumours it was going to be brought to an end. It's not uncommon for a network to give a show that's on the bubble one last abridged season to wrap things up, see also Gotham, and it's apparent that, while it has worked out nicely for the producers, the show wouldn't be ending if the network wanted it to continue, which they obviously don't. Number 1, Crisis on Infinite Earths is an obvious endpoint. The annual Arrowverse crossover has become a highlight of the DC calendar, with Arrow, The Flash, and Supergirl all teaming up for a few nights each fall to take on a brand new threat. And as teased by Elseworlds, next year's is going to be the biggest and most ambitious yet: Crisis on Infinite Earths. In the comics, Crisis is a major crossover event that leads to a huge number of deaths, including those of Supergirl and The Flash, Barry Allen, and ultimately ends up rebooting the entire DC universe. Elseworlds really hinted towards this, with Supergirl and The Flash seemingly headed towards their deaths until Oliver Queen intervened. He spoke with the Monitor, and it was his actions that appeared to prevent their fates. So does that mean he's traded his life for theirs? Oliver has long been willing to put himself on the line to save those who he cares about, and even an entire city, so it would be very much fitting with his character to make this kind of sacrifice. And well, it's Crisis on Infinite Earths. Something terrible has to happen to at least one of the heroes, given how many die in every single Crisis in the comics, from Infinite Crisis to Final Crisis to Infinite Crisis to Identity Crisis to Heroes in Crisis. There are so many crises, guys. This is an event that should radically alter the Arrowverse, and Oliver's death would certainly be a means of doing that. It wouldn't even necessarily mean Amell would never appear, since we've seen dead characters come back in a variety of ways, but it would close the arc of Earth 1 Oliver. Since Arrow has 10 episodes beginning in the fall, that'll roughly take it up to when the crossover typically happens, making this a way for the show to go out on a high note and an obvious way of ending Arrow's story. But I want to know how you all think about Arrow's cancellation. Was it about the time the show drew to a close, or was there still some arrows left in the old proverbial quiver? Please post your thoughts down in the comments below, like, share, and subscribe, then head back over to whatculture.com where you can find more of this sort of thing every day. As always, I've been Ewan. You can talk comics and everything else with me over on Twitter at EwanRuinsThings, and I'll see you next time. Bye!